All right, so in this lesson, we're going to review angle relationships in parallel lines because there's a lot of different vocabulary to describe the different relationships. And I want to make sure you guys know the words so that when you see it in problems, you understand what it's talking about. So let's start with what we learned last time. So let's give an example of alternate interior angles. So angle 3 and angle 6 are alternate interior angles. And so what that means, alternate means they're on opposite sides of the line, and interior means they're inside of these two parallel lines. So we're going to learn different words for the relationships between these other angles, but let's review what's equivalent to each other. So let's review which angles are congruent to each other. So we know that angle 3 and angle 6 are congruent. And then because of that, we also know that angle 7 and 2 are congruent, right? Because these are vertical 2, 3, and 6. And then similarly, angle 5 and 4 are also alternate interior angles because they're on opposite sides. And so 8 and 1 are congruent. So we have basically two sets of congruent angles on both parallel lines. So we're going to look at some examples and learn the names for them. So in your notebook, you should have the diagrams copied down. So let's look at this example. So let's first figure out, what do these two angles look like? Well, how do these two angles relate? So angle X is congruent to this angle because those are alternate interior. And so we can see it's also congruent to angle Y, the way this is shown. And these two angles, the way they're drawn, are called corresponding angles. So sketch this example of what corresponding angles look like. So they're on the same side of the transversal. The transversal is this green line right here. And they're on, and one is inside and one is outside of the parallel lines. And corresponding angles are also congruent, right? We can see they're the same. These angles match up to each other. Okay, so let's do a few more names that you guys can get those notes for. All right, so these two angles are on opposite sides and they're outside of the parallel lines. So these two angles are called alternate exterior angles. Sorry, let me make that a little neater because it's a new word. Okay, alternate exterior angles. And we can see by remembering about our alternate interior angles and our vertical angles, these are also congruent. And their alternate means they're on opposite sides of the transversal. And they're outside of the parallel lines. Okay, there's a couple more words to know. Oh, well, this one this is back to our original. These angles are alternate interior angles. Because they're on opposite sides. So they're also on opposite sides of transversal. And they're inside the parallel lines. And those are congruent. Okay, let's see. Okay, so this one's a little different. So these two angles, if we look at them, they're actually not congruent, right? So those two blue angles are congruent. And so that means these green angles are congruent, which means these two angles are supplementary. And these angles are called same side interior. And so same side interior angles are supplementary, which means they add to 180. because they're on the same side of the transversal and they're both inside the parallel lines. Let's look at, okay, well okay, great. This last example, these are just, another one we've already studied, these angles are just across from each other. So these are vertical angles and they are congruent. So make sure you have a sketch of all those different examples, vertical angles, same side interior angles, alternate interior angles, alternate exterior angles, and corresponding angles, because I'm going to ask you guys to identify those angle relationships and use them to solve problems. So let's just solve a few quick problems using those relationships in some of these trickier diagrams. Okay, let's start with example 1. Okay, so there's a lot going on here, so I think it helps to just first identify the parallel lines. So I can see that these two yellow lines here are parallel to each other, and this is my blue transversal. So there's other lines in the diagram, but those ones don't really matter. The other lines don't matter. So let's look at some angles that we know. So I like to start with some alternate interior angles. So these two blue angles are going to match to each other, which means these green angles match. And I can see that these angles are on the outside of those two. So these are alternate exterior angles. And we know from before that they're congruent to each other. So if I want to solve for x, I'll just equal them to each other. So 55x equals 54x plus 2. So to solve this equation, I'll just subtract 54x from both sides. And then this one's a pretty easy one. That gets me 1x equals 2, so x equals 2. So the key piece here is just identifying the relationship correctly in the beginning in order to set up the equation. So let's do 2 more. Okay, so this will be example 2. And again, there's a lot of lines going on here, so I'm just going to highlight the ones that really matter for me to solve this problem. So it's these two, and then this transversal right here. And by looking at that, I can see that these angles match up to each other. These are corresponding angles. And so corresponding angles are congruent as well. So I'll solve it the same way. X plus 70 equals 62. So subtract 70 from both sides. So x equals -8. So the hard part is really identifying the relationship in the beginning. Let's do one more with a different relationship, and then we'll practice it more in class. So here's example 3. Okay, so let's look at the lines that matter. So these two lines are parallel, and then we have a transversal right here. So I can see that these are both inside, but they're on the same side. So these are same side interior, and they add, oh, I'm sorry. Same side interior angles add to 180 degrees. So to set up my equation, 34x plus 5 plus 73 equals 180. So I can take 73 away. So 34x plus 5 equals 107. Take 5 away. And then if I divide that, x equals, I think that makes x equal to 3. Let's make sure. Great, so then x equals 3. Okay, so let me just write down all the key words that you should have in your notes. So corresponding angles is one. The next one is alternate interior, which we already had that one. Oops, I don't like how this is doing this. Okay, sorry, let me just write them out like normal. Okay, so corresponding angles. Alternate interior angles. Alternate exterior angles. Same side interior. And same side exterior. So these are all the angles that are created when we have two parallel lines cut by a transversal. So make sure you have these words in your notes. We'll keep practicing identifying these angles from diagrams and then using them to solve problems.